Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break in our very fancy in-lounge and that you had a lot of caffeine, because we are going to talk about big data, and that will require a lot of attention and concentration. This morning, Alex Steen, our EMEA Managing Director, highlighted 4 profiles: the earliest adopter, the most connected, the most popular, and the most endorsed. And that out of 1,000 Talent Connect attendees. And I don't want to break the myth, but it actually took us probably 1 minute to pull those profiles. Why? Because LinkedIn is big data by design. Big data is at the heart of our value proposition and our innovation model. And then we are keen on helping customers, people like you, become more informed on their market, on their organization, on their talent flow, so they can become strategic advisor to their business. People who make this happen are James Raybould, our Global Director for Insights, and Will Hamlin, our data guru. And they are going to explain how to leverage your LinkedIn insights to get a seat at the decision table. James and Will be joined by Charlie Milne from Westpac and Richard Hutchinson from the Home Retail Group. And they will explain and share their best practices and strategies to make the best of big data. We were so impressed by Charlie's work that we actually flew her all around the world. She's coming from Australia. She was in Vegas last week, where she wowed the crowd, and now she's in London. And actually, Richard is equally impressive, but it was easier for us to get a grab on him. We found him in our backyard, and we just had to put him on the train. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to Will, who is going to kick this session off.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Laurence. My name is Will Hamlin, and I'm very excited today to talk to you about how to use data for talent acquisition. And I'm excited to talk to all of you personally for 2 reasons. One is that I strongly and truly believe that talent is the most important long-term differentiator of a company's success, and that data can fundamentally change the way that you do that. The second is actually a personal reason. I just moved to London, literally on Monday. And so I'm really excited to start working with you and hearing about the challenges and opportunities faced across the European market. But I want to start at the beginning, the very beginning. From the beginning of time, I'm at the beginning. From the very beginning of time, until 2003, mankind created 5 exabytes of data. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what the hell is an exabyte? And the good news is that for the sake of this presentation, and hopefully for the rest of your lives, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that an exabyte is an enormous, enormous amount of data. And what matters even more is that during the 2 days of this conference, mankind will also create 5 exabytes of data. In other words, we will create as much data during these 2 days as during the billions of years of human existence until 2003. The pace and acceleration of the creation of data is completely up and to the right, and it's only going to continue. However, this offers opportunities, but also challenges. And the challenge is that without context, data is meaningless. Take, for example, these 2 numbers. What can you say about them? I mean, they're fairly similar to one another, they're both odd, but they don't really tell you a whole lot. Where they start to become more powerful is the stories that lie within those numbers. The first number is actually how many hours I listened to Spotify, the music streaming service, in the past year. Big music fan. The second number is the number of connections that I currently have on LinkedIn. And what services like Spotify and LinkedIn are starting to do with this data is where it starts to become very powerful. Let's look at a couple examples. Spotify can look at that 1,000+ hours of listening history and start to provide recommendations. For example, 2 weeks ago they suggested a band to me, The Cults, indie rock band. I quite liked them. Of course, sometimes it isn't always positive. This week, Spotify also correctly predicted that I still know all the words to "I'm a genie in a bottle, baby." Clearly, that's something that I would have liked to keep underneath the surface a little bit, as judged by that horrendous dance move. I mean, and think about LinkedIn. LinkedIn can harness the vast network of your connections and your activity to predict people that you may know. It's often very helpful, but sometimes you look on there and you see, I haven't seen that person in 20 years. How do they know that I know them? It can become very powerful. And so why does this matter for all of you? Well, let's think for a second about scale. Take, for example, Wembley Stadium. Capacity of 90,000 people, massive. The companies in this room and on the stream are hiring, could fill dozens of Wembley stadiums with the numbers of hires you're making every year. You're hiring millions of people. If we can use data to do that better, that's just an amazing opportunity. Amazing. But it's kind of scary. It's a little, it's a little intimidating. I mean, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you feel like your data is good at using data your organization is good at using data to recruit right now. Okay, not a lot of hands. But that's okay. That's okay. You're not alone. Only 17% of European talent acquisition leaders believe their organization uses data well to make hiring decisions. We're still in the early stages here. And today, in this session and the following one, we're going to start to talk about how you can change that. And we'll talk about using 3 Ps. First, how you can plan by using talent pool analysis. Second, how you can prioritize engaged talent and measure your talent brand. And third, how you can use data to partner with the business. So let's start with the first P. I'll talk for about 5 minutes about how you can plan using talent pool analysis, and then Charlie will come up to help share her story about how she did this at Westpac. The first, simplest, and potentially most powerful way that you can use data on talent pools to plan is to set expectations with hiring managers. It's fairly simple. Hopefully some of you are already doing it, but it's still very effective. And the way you can do this is when a hiring manager comes to you with a difficult requisition with lots of different requirements and qualifications, what in many places in the industry we call a purple squirrel, you can come back and help manage expectations about how hard that's going to be. And why is this important? I mean, because otherwise all you had before is intuition. And so let's do a quick intuition exercise. Raise your hand if you think there are purple squirrels in the wild. Like actual purple squirrels running around. Okay, clearly, okay, like 2 people think there are magenta rodents. Those 2 people are right. There have been 3 purple squirrels discovered in the wild in the past 15 years. Everyone else, your intuition was wrong. One of them, Pete, the purple squirrel, was found right here in the UK. The theory at the time was that he had eaten an ink cartridge, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it was a disgruntled recruiter who was taking it out on poor Pete. So, how can you do this with a talent pool perhaps a bit more realistic than lavender squirrels? Well, let's take Westpac, for example. Let's say that Westpac was expanding more into the UK, and they wanted to hire private bankers. But the hiring manager set a very difficult criteria for Charlie's team. Well, Charlie could use LinkedIn Recruiter to help show exactly how big the talent pool is. So for example, she could search private banker in London with more than 10 years of experience, who's a VP with an MBA, and she could go back to that hiring manager, she or someone on her team, and say, there's only 86 people in that talent pool. Do we really need all of those qualifications? Is the MBA necessary? Can we change a couple of these things? And have a consultative conversation as a strategic partner to make sure that we have the most realistic requirements possible. Again, it's very simple, very easy, and it's something that hopefully you can do tomorrow if you're not already. And so we've been doing this for a while, and Recruiter can show the supply of talent, but in the past couple years, what we've increasingly started to do is look at the demand for talent, which we measure by how often candidates are being searched for on LinkedIn. And what this can help do is help identify markets for talent. So, continuing with the private banker example, let's say that Charlie was looking at different markets across the UK. First, she looked at London. Very large supply, understandably, but also very high demand. Then let's say that she expanded the scope and wanted to check maybe Leeds. Much lower supply, also fairly low demand. And then she could expand it even further and look at Birmingham. Much larger supply of talent compared to Leeds, but equivalent demand. So it's going to be easier to hire in Birmingham than in Leeds. And so we've been doing this for our largest customers and through a series of reports that we've released for marketing purposes for the past year and a half. But one thing we always hear from all of you is, I want to get more granular. I want to get more detailed. So how do we do this? What have we heard? So let's take one potential candidate, T. Boone Pickens. For those of you who haven't heard of T. Boone, he's an investor in the oil and energy space with a keen interest in renewable energy. He's also a member of LinkedIn and an influencer. And let's say if you were trying to hire T. Boone, the passive candidate. He's a billionaire, so I'm pretty sure he's not looking for a job. But let's say you were trying to hire him. And you looked at the standard facets on his profile. You could find out where he lived, what industry he was in, where he went to school. But that doesn't tell the full picture of T. Boone, the perfect passive candidate. Where you can get that, and start to get that, is going down on the profile to the skills. And there you can see that T. Boone is endorsed for not only energy, but also renewable energy, natural gas, wind power, spaces that he's been making investments in the past few years. Gives a much more clean and complete picture of T. Boone, the passive candidate. And so what we've started to do on the Insights team is we've started to group and cluster these skills into different categories. So for example, the skills shown behind me on the screen, we've grouped in the category of renewable energy. Solar energy, natural gas, clean tech, and so on. So we can classify candidates based on the skills for which they're endorsed. And so today I'm very excited to announce that we're releasing 7 new talent pool reports right here in Europe on renewable energy, but also Java, corporate law, corporate finance, and a few other categories. And you can download these talent pool reports at lnkd.in/plan. And so about 6 months ago, we released a series of these reports in Australia. And one of them was around women in leadership. And when we started to hear about what Westpac was doing with this kind of data and how they were applying it to their business, we were so excited that, as Laurence mentioned, we flew Charlie Milne all the way around the world. So with that, very proud and excited to introduce Charlie Milne from Westpac.
Thank you, Will. No pressure then, right? I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all today. Obviously, I've done the Vegas gig, I've come over here. I really hope that what I've got to share with you is going to be helpful. I really want to start by saying that it's not complicated and it's not rocket science. It's really something very simple that we've been doing with the data that's available to us that's helping to inform our recruitment strategies. So let me start by setting the scene here. I'm guessing that when you think of Australia, you probably think of one of the images behind me. It might be that you think of Bondi Beach, the Harbour Bridge, maybe Steve Irwin, or possibly even Vegemite. But what I'm thinking you probably don't think about are the big banks. Now, in Australia, we've got 4 key big banks. Those 4 institutions are known as the 4 pillars of the Australian economy. And between them, they generate $71 million of profit each and every day. They're some of the most profitable banks in the world. And pretty much as Aussie as they come. Now, Westpac was the first company in Australia. It was founded in 1817. It's got a market cap of 100 billion and 36,000 employees. So I guess you could say we're a pretty large company. We're certainly one of the top 5 in Australia. And today I'm going to talk to you about diversity. So Will mentioned before a big focus for us on women in leadership. Each of these 4 big banks is a very strong financial institution and has a very strong employee value proposition. So we really need to look at how we're differentiating ourselves and our marketing from what they're taking to market and how they're attracting talent. Now, one of the things we have acting in our favour is that we have a very strong and very influential female CEO. But diversity is important on a number of levels. So it's interconnected directly with innovation. And as we've heard here today from some of the data points, and also from just the sheer number of products that LinkedIn have released over the last 12 months, the world is moving very, very fast. If we want to stay competitive in this kind of market, we need to be thinking differently. We need new ideas. And the easiest way to generate these new ideas is by leveraging existing ones, but in new and fresh ways. So if we have a team that's connected from different industries, different fields, different cultures and different genders, we've got a better fighting chance of making ourselves competitive in our industry. This is the landscape for us in Australia. There are 3 times more men than women in leadership roles in our country. Now, that figure reduces, as you can see, on a ratio with the level of experience, so the number of years of experience, which is also correlated to seniority. Another interesting fact about Australia, we ranked number 1 for inclusion of women in education, but number 45 in the world for women in the workplace. So there's a few challenges that we face. The data shows specifically in our industry, which is finance and insurance here, we've only got 17% women in senior leadership roles, versus, say, professional services, where you can see that they've got more like 28%. And this is where we saw a potential opportunity. So if professional services have 28% women, the data clearly indicates to us that there's a number of women there that would have a skill set that could be applicable in our industry. So what are we going to do to tap into them? So we didn't just look at the data around the types of women we could attract to our organisation. We also looked at what is it about retention that we can do differently. So here you see the number of hires that we've brought into the organisation above the line in green. And below you see where we're losing them to competitors, so where we've had departures of our female leaders. And whilst we're doing well across the board, we can clearly take a lesson here that there are 2 of our key competitors to whom we're losing more talent than we're gaining. Now, what is it that they've got to offer that we can investigate that's specific to attracting these particular leaders? And therefore, how can we use that information to strengthen our value proposition and support our female leaders in staying with our organisation? We also looked at what is it that motivates these women. So what are they looking for in a company? What can we do to attract them? What is it that we need to position? And you can see that clearly women are looking for a company that's going to value their contribution, where they've got flexible working arrangements, good relationships with colleagues, and where they feel like they're going to fit in. So we took this data and we thought about recruitment a little bit like sales and marketing. We need to be selling what the ladies are buying. So the data helped us to position our message. And what we did with this was we looked at what is it that's real and true and intrinsic in our organisation today, and part of our employee value proposition that we can highlight and bring out to share with these ladies to attract them to our organisation. And so we focused on messaging around inclusiveness, the fact that we've got a really open and friendly workplace. We focused around flexibility. We've got multiple different options in terms of part-time working, job sharing, working from home, and that's attractive to females. We also looked at our engagement with charity and the community, and we found that that was something that females really cared about. And then we highlighted that we're one of the globally leading companies for sustainability, and that was an important piece to attract and connect with these individuals in the field. So once we positioned the message, we then sought to measure our outcomes. So as you can see here, we're market leading at this point in time. We've got 40% women in leadership, and that was a 2% increase year on year. And that was partly through some of these strategies. But we don't think that we've finished yet. We've got an aspirational target of reaching 50% women in leadership, and we're going to continue to partner with LinkedIn to help make that happen. So what have I talked through based on the data today? It's really as simple as 3 key steps. So the first one is targeting your hiring, knowing who you're going for and what talent pool you're focusing on. The second is about positioning your message. What language are you going to use? How are you going to speak to them and engage them with what they're looking to buy? And then measuring your results. You really want to benchmark yourself against your peers so that you can keep yourself honest and know what success looks like. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand you back to Will.
Thank you, Charlie. So now that we've talked a little bit about how you can use data on talent pools to plan, the next piece we'll talk through is how you can use data to prioritize engaged talent, but also measure your talent brand. And to do that, I'd like to start with a story. About 2.5 years ago, I worked at Deloitte, and I was very happy there. I was a perfectly passive candidate. However, I'd recently started to read stories about LinkedIn. They had just gone through the IPO. I was interested about the concept of a professional network. I thought it was very powerful. And so I started to research the company on LinkedIn. I went to their company page, and I followed LinkedIn. Then, in August of 2011, I received the InMail that you see on the screen behind me. And rather than my standard reply of no thanks, I'm happy with where I am right now, I was just engaged enough with LinkedIn and with their talent brand that I replied, and I said, sure, I'm interested to learn more. 2 months later, I was hired. And once I started at LinkedIn and started meeting with companies and meeting with all of you, one of the first pieces that I heard was, okay, but how many candidates are we engaging? How do we measure the strength of our talent brand? And so, about a year ago, we released the Talent Brand Index, a way to measure and benchmark the strength of your employment brand. And I'll talk through what the Talent Brand Index is here, using the example of Home Retail Group, Richard's company. So what we did is we surveyed candidates, tens of thousands of candidates on LinkedIn, about hundreds of companies, and we asked them 2 questions. The first question was, are you familiar with these companies as a place to work? And then we looked at people who said yes and what they were doing on LinkedIn. And we found that they were viewing employee profiles and connecting with employees. And one piece I would like to stress is familiar with a company as an employer, as a place to work. For example, I love Frosties. I think that whoever came up with the idea to Trojan horse dessert as breakfast cereal is a complete genius. I looked it up the other day. Frosties is 37% sugar. It's actually almost half sugar. And I can eat it for breakfast. It's amazing. But I have no idea what it's like to work at Kellogg's, the company that makes Frosties. Could be good, could be bad. I'm familiar with the consumer brand, but not with their talent brand. On the other hand, I have friends who work at startups that don't even have business models, but I know that my friends like their job, work long hours for fairly mediocre pay. In that case, I would be familiar with the company as a place to work. So when we measure this for companies like Home Retail Group, in the case of Home Retail Group, we found that almost 400,000 people are familiar with the company as a place to work. The next thing that we looked at is engagement. We asked how many professionals are interested in companies as employers, are engaging with their brands. And in this case, we found that people who said that were engaging with jobs, following the company, and researching the company on LinkedIn. And so when we measure that for Home Retail Group, there's more than 70,000. But once again, like the 2 numbers I showed at the beginning, it's harder to get a sense for this without a benchmark. And so the number that we think really matters is the Talent Brand Index. It's of those who are familiar with your company as a place to work, how many are engaging? How many are raising their hand and expressing an interest in your company as a place to work? And for Home Retail Group, that's 18%. And because it's a percentage, no matter the size of your company, whether it's large or small, we can measure this for everybody as a measure of how attractive you are to prospective candidates. And not only that, we can then benchmark you against your peers. So in Home Retail Group's case, they have the second highest talent brand index of 7 companies amongst that they're compared to. And they're very near the top. They're doing pretty well, which is part of why we have Richard here today. But this is just 7 companies. what starts to happen when we look at all of the companies and all of the members across LinkedIn? And to talk a little bit about that, I'll invite James Raybould on stage.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning to my mother, who is watching the streaming. So, hello, Mom. I'm doing well so far. So Will talked about, in this example, Home Retail Group can compare themselves versus the competitors, but we thought, well, there's a lot of interactions going on from Home Retail Group, but also every company in the world. And so we thought, how do we measure that? And if you think about this morning, Dan Shapiro talked about this new candidate journey, and we can think about where all these people, these 230 million members are, where are they in this journey with different companies? And so we thought about, okay, how do we aggregate all this information, all this big data, to think about then which companies are most attractive, which companies are most compelling to prospects? And this data is very big. So we tracked 25 billion, that's billion with a B, interactions going on in the last 12 months. So in the last 12 months, we are tracking all our members, the 230 million plus members, what they're doing, how they're interacting with companies. Are they following them? Are they researching them online? Are they looking at jobs? Are they applying to jobs? Again, 25 billion interactions. This isn't kind of small-scale survey. This is big, big data we're looking at to try and figure out, okay, from this, where are most candidates, where are most potential applicants looking at? So we can essentially create a list of who's most in demand, who's most popular. And so we launched this last year for the first time. And then last week in Las Vegas at our major conference, we launched this at a global level, where we identified which companies around the world across the entire member base, the entire 208 million members, where they're most interested in working. And then today, what we're really excited is to go from this global level, again, across the entire base, to a regional level, because the beauty of LinkedIn's data is that we know where people are. So we know if members are based in the UK, in France, et cetera. And so what we're doing today is we're actually launching 10 regional rankings. So you can see here the regions. We've got a few in the Americas. We've got a few in Asia. And then we have 4 specifically for Europe. So we have France, the Netherlands. We then combined Germany, Switzerland, and Austria together. And then finally the UK. And so that's all being available today. And we're going to start applicants. We're in London today with the UK rankings. So, drum roll, please, proverbial, et cetera. We're our top 20 most in-demand companies, again, for candidates in the UK, where they're most excited about working, most engaged with working, are right here. So can we get a round of applause for the companies on this list? So for those in the back, and I'm seeing people in the back squinting a little bit, so I'll give you the top 5. So major congratulations to Google, Apple, BP, Shell, and John Lewis for being our top 5. So kudos to you. And it's actually interesting that Google and Apple were also number 1 and 2 on our global list. So people want to make cool phones and make cool technologies. But then actually the rest of the list is fairly broad, and it's actually very European-based and very UK-based, which is great. And I was incredibly excited to see number 7 because I grew up in the UK. And how many of you guys used to watch Grandstand on Saturday afternoons? So when I was 10 years old, I thought Des Lynam was the coolest person ever. The mustache, the horrible comb over, the guy's amazing. And so when I was 10, my dream job was to be Des Lynam, and actually even today it still might be to be Des Lynam. So if the BBC is in the room and you're looking for a new hire, I could be there. But so excited to see the BBC representing. So again, congratulations to the top 20 in the UK, and then the link right here will take all of you to the other lists. So again, as of today, we now have 10 regional lists, 10 country lists for that, so I'll leave that on the screen for a second. So feel free to take Parker's advice from earlier, take out your phones, take a look, and see how all of you did. And what's great about the list is they're very, very regional. So there's a few companies that tend to do very well. Accenture and Microsoft are on all the lists, but generally speaking, most of the time, the list is very country-centric, which is fantastic. So we've talked about kind of planning with talent pools. We talked about prioritizing the talent brand, and in this case, measuring talent brand, and really being excited to announce these rankings. But now what we'd love to do is talk to our third P, the idea of partnering. And how do we use data to do that? And so to do that, I'm going to ask Charlie to come back up, and also Richard Hutchinson from Home Retail Group, and we're going to have a mini panel and really talk about what they've done to successfully partner with the business to use data and really create these great relationships. So round of applause for Charlie again and Richard. So Richard, if you don't mind just giving a quick intro to what you're up to, and also specifically how you've used Talent Brand, how you've measured Talent Brand at Home Retail Group.
Okay, so first of all, my name is Richard Hutchinson. I'm from the Home Retail Group. Hopefully some of you will know that's ultimately Argos, Homebase and Habitat in terms of retail brands. My role is as a sourcing channel manager to work alongside the recruitment team to ultimately ensure that we've got the right sourcing strategy in place and then look to optimise that channel strategy for the best return on investment. In terms of developing an employer brand, we do a lot of stuff using the LinkedIn products on LinkedIn. And one of the key things for me is about the company news updates. And what I find really useful with the data that I could analyse in terms of the impact analysis is really helping me to understand which updates are really getting the most interaction from our followers. And what that's actually helped me to do is get a foot or a seat at the table with our PR colleagues and help to actually give me access to information and news updates that necessarily in the past I wasn't really getting. Because what I was finding and what I was able to demonstrate from the insight data was that our followers were interested in business updates as opposed to stuff about jobs. They were really wanting to understand our strategy and understand where we were heading as an organisation.
That's awesome. Are there any specific topics that resonated most? I mean, I think, and by the way, we've heard as well that many companies, those in the room and around the world, have found that, again, when it's all about jobs and all about very specific stuff, it's not very compelling. When it's broader than that, were there any kind of themes that stood out?
Recently we announced a partnership between Argos and eBay, and that was a great example of, we were seeing a kind of interaction percentage of about 46%, as opposed to when we were doing something like jobs, which was around the kind of 9%. Another example is we recently launched the Argos My Tablet. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's worth a go. And again, that had a high interaction. So, it was really helpful for me to be able to push that back to the business and say, let's give this insight to our followers.
And then, go ahead.
We were able to catch up a little bit yesterday to get to know each other before we're up on stage together. And one of the conversations that I think was a mutual challenge was around retail brand versus employer brand. So for Westpac Group, it's a consistent challenge that we've got these well-known family of retail brands that people know for the banking, the shop front, and then we've got, to try and tie those together into an employer brand that sits over the top. And one of the challenges for us was partly the architecture of our site in order to get the data in the right ways. And the other challenge was to generate that employee value proposition externally to such an extent that we could get the engagement to really raise our profile around us as an employer, not just us as a provider of banking services. So, we had a big challenge and a big push to try and build that and grow that and promote that, to build our follower base from a really low level, I think it was just under 15,000 about 12 months ago, to just over 75,000 followers now.
Westpac are ahead of us. We've gone from 2,000 to 21,000, but it's a similar story in terms of really understanding what to try and do in terms of building those individual brands in a space where Home Retail Group isn't necessarily understood or known in the external market.
And I think we've seen a lot of clients finding that having data to bring to the table means you can kind of elevate your position. You go from kind of occasionally being like an order taker to now a true partner. Are there specific tips and tricks that you guys have found to, again, really partner using data with the business?
Yeah, so again, for us, I guess LinkedIn has really helped to build the credibility of our our recruiters within our hiring managers. I guess a year ago, some of the conversations that we were having with hiring managers were really about order taking, was really about getting to the point where we were just taking a brief on a vacancy. What actually we're now able to do, because of the data that we can give them insight into, is get to the table before they start actually raising the request for the vacancy. So a good example is we've just we've just created a new digital function within our Argos business as we look to turn into becoming a digital retail leader. And one of the key things was about understanding where we're going to base some of these new roles, absolutely brand new roles to our organisation, something that we didn't really understand in terms of skill set, candidate profile, etc. And our head office is Milton Keynes, and the assumption was that we were going to base those roles in Milton Keynes. For the insight and conversations that we were able to provide to them, we're actually now thinking about moving those roles to London. And that for us as a recruitment team is a really powerful message back to the business that we have the knowledge and the data that really can help us make business strategy decisions as opposed to just being able to fill a vacancy.
That's great. Charlie, any tips and tricks?
I think on a really operational level, we actually equipped our recruiters with iPads and a significant amount of education, and sent them out to go and meet with some of the hiring managers, particularly targeting some of our really challenging hiring managers. So for us, we had some very heavy agency usage in particular pockets within our finance department, and the benefit of being able to demonstrate the talent pool, provide the scope and scale based on the desired skills, and then being able to even provide the hiring manager with a list of names gave us a significant opportunity to really engage. And the hiring manager actually then started to identify people in the list of names that he knew or had worked with previously and start to get excited. And that gave us the connection with him to show that we genuinely understood his challenge and to use the data to help support us with direct sourcing for those roles.
Yeah, it's the same for us in that, I had a recruiter in our team that was being pushed to use an agency for a project manager role. We sort of policed the use of agencies in that they came to me and asked the question about whether we should engage agency, and I challenged her to think about what have we talked to the hiring manager about in terms of what does that marketplace really look like for us. And by demonstrating to the recruiter that we could actually find that talent ourselves, we had a very different conversation with the hiring manager than we were having previously. And it was just a great experience for that recruiter to actually see how using that data could change that mindset.
On a similar note, are there ways that you use the data to kind of make a proposal for an investment, to make a proposal to change how you're going to be recruiting? How does that work?
I mean, it's very valid for us right now in that we're actually using not necessarily LinkedIn data, but the data that we capture across our recruitment process to really look at vacancy trends, issues with regards to time to hire, et cetera, to understand whether our model is fit for purpose. And we're actually going through the process now of re-scoping what that model looks like, and it's the data that's driven that conversation.
So I think for us, one of the assumptions is that because we're big and we're a bank and we're, obviously profitable, that, it's easy to get funding for this kind of thing. I'd like to highlight the fact that it seriously wasn't, and we're a very conservative culture. The piece that enabled us was the data around return on investment. So we undertook a pilot first of all, and because we were able to, generate a return on investment that was a real deal figure that was going to hit the bottom line, we were able to get the finance over the line to support us to then extend. We've actually return on investment 300% in our first 12 months, and we're looking to expand that much further in the next 12 months ahead. So that's really the key metrics that underlie it. The other pieces are really good for opening conversations with executives and helping them to understand some of the challenges within the talent pools that we're facing. So I think at this point we've used pockets of the data, much like the piece that I just shared with you earlier, in specific areas where we knew we had some challenges.
Perfect. So I think the final question would be, Will walked us through these exabytes and dinosaurs and how data is getting bigger and bigger. So, in the next few years, there's going to be more and more things that you're able to do. What are you most excited about using data to do at your company?
So for us, I think we're now at the point where we're looking to define our business critical vacancies, so the roles that really will impact on whether we can actually deliver a service to our customers. So not the CEO of the organisation, but actually potentially someone that in a warehouse, for example, holds the licence to make that warehouse operate. So for us, what we now need to understand, having mapped what those business critical roles look like, is what do the candidate profiles really look like. So we're really keen to work harder to understand what we can get out of LinkedIn to really start to understand candidate profiles, behaviours, to start some of the stuff that Westpac have done in terms of building those correct marketing messages out to them.
I think for us, there are a couple of things. So one is about, we've leveraged real pockets of the data to do the analysis and to work through some strategies to date. I think it's more about expanding that into a more formalized, longer-term workforce plan. The other piece, I think, is more about, we've worked really hard to engage with our employees and encourage them to get up onto LinkedIn. We've done lobby launches and marketing and campaign to our employees, and we've now got sort of over 65, I think might be near 70% now of our employees up online, and really to use the data to better understand what it is that's motivating them. I think we heard just earlier around sort of that employee engagement piece. I think that some of the behaviours can really help us to understand that from a genuine perspective of who's clicking on other jobs and who's got connections and network internally within the company. And I think that the build out of LinkedIn to support us in internal mobility is a really exciting opportunity as well.
Perfect. Well, I think it's really appropriate that we start out with planning, we would prioritize, and we finish with partnering, because ultimately, in the same way that all of you partner with your hiring managers in the business to try and be effective, LinkedIn's goal is to partner with you to supply you with the insights and the information to make you as successful as possible. And so I think it's actually a perfect segue to of course, thank our two folks up here, but also have Lindsay Ahern for our Insight team come up, because our next session is around how LinkedIn has partnered with Ernst & Young around really using data and shaping what's going to be coming in some recruiting trends. And so big round of applause for Richard and Charlie, and let's have Lindsay come up and say.